Okay, so John tells me we are streaming, so stop swearing if you're doing that, because you're on international. Let's pray, okay? The prayers of our Holy Fathers, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on us, amen. Heavenly King, Comforter, true Spirit, who art everywhere, and fill us all, treasury of good things, and giver of life, come and dwell within us, and cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good one. God, be merciful to us sinners. Thou hast created us, Lord. Have mercy on us who have sinned, and ask that you will forgive us. Elijah, I want you to do me a favor. Everybody sit. On the bench, right below the choir area, on the bench on the men's side, there's a whole bunch of little books. They're kind of like a brown cover. Use a pile of them. Will you go get them and bring them down? On the bench, right behind the choir. Yeah, all of them. They're not that many.
Like these?
I'm Joe's wife.
Just in case,
How are you?
just in case some of you don't know Dr. Jeff Holdeman.
Would have been your name today.
Hey, Jeff, if I indicate this incorrectly, you can correct me, of course. I believe what you did is you began this whole area on language retention. And so somehow got into the language retention, particularly of the people in this parish from the old believers who came over from Poland, from Lithuania, and then he got with great fascination with the old believers themselves. And now what he's done is to record every person from every family in the United States who are old believers, and in Lithuania and so forth. And he has translated a book that's available, I announced that to you before, translated a book that a Polishman wrote about the old believers in Poland. So I'm not going to try to talk anymore. Jeff, your floor. How about right here, Jeff? Because you are streaming, so I think the camera is there. Okay?
Thank you, Brother Pittman.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a while since I've been back to Erie, since before COVID as well. So it's wonderful to be here, wonderful to see faces and new faces and known faces as well. I came actually in setup for another visit that I'll be making to Erie and to all of the congregations, historical congregations in the eastern United States in a few weeks with some colleagues who are specialists in Old Believer history and Old Believer icons. And so Pimen Maximovich Safronov was a very famous, one of the absolute most famous iconographers of the 20th century. He was born in Estonia, came to the United States in 1947, he was based in Millville, New Jersey, and then worked all up and down the eastern seaboard, as well as in Miami, Florida, and San Francisco as well. And so my two colleagues, Grigory Patashenko and Marilis Paver, have already written a book on Safronov and the first half of his life in Estonia and then around Europe as well, and on his iconography, his icon writing, the tradition, the places where he's had a lasting impact, and this is this beautiful full-color book on his icons as well and his history in Europe. And so they'll be coming to the United States. I've been trying to get them to come for 20 years now, and finally we received funding from the Hillendar Research Library at Ohio State, and they will be coming for 5.5 weeks, and we'll be making tours of all the historical Pomorci congregations in the eastern U.S. and looking for Safronov icons. We'll go to all the places where he painted all the frescoes, did the interior work on iconostases, and painted individual icons as well, wrote individual icons. And so we will be in search of his impact in the eastern United States. And then also they are specialists in all the other Old Believer traditions, like Mikhailov. Father Pittman has one of their two books on Mikhailov, these beautiful hardback full-color studies of his life and his iconography. And so we will also then be looking to identify icons by the masters like Mikhailov and Frolov as well. So my tour right now is to make contact again with, or renew contact with all of the congregations, figure out logistics and things like that, and then also to let people know about my new publication that came out. And this is a translation from the Polish from the 1977 book by Eugeniusz Iwaniec. And it is the history that we have been missing on the Eastern U.S. Old Believers and the descendants of the people from the Old Believers and who practice the Old Rite. So everybody, most families will say, oh yeah, we're from Suwałki. And when I would interview them and I would say, oh, the city or the region, people didn't know. What is the village? Maybe they might have little bits and pieces of the names of the villages. And I would sit in the National Archives looking up Ellis Island records back before they were online, trying to find people's villages and things like that. As I had interviewed people in my first year here, I was collecting all the village names and locations and everything. And I made, that was in 1998, and I made my first visit in the summer of 1999. And went and stayed, if you know the name Saba Legenzov, Sam Lee, his village or his town was Sejny. And so I was like, I'm going to go and stay in Sejny. And took the bus in from the Czech Republic through Poland all the way up to Suwałki City, took the last bus of the night to Sejny, got there at 11 p.m. All the lights were out. There was one light, and I walked toward the light, and it was the one hotel. I was so naive. I didn't think of making a reservation or anything, and went to the hotel and knocked on the door. They unlocked the door. They had a spare room. I stayed there, and then I would make day trips out into the villages and into Suwałki City, looking for the prayer houses and looking for the cemeteries. I just knew nothing when I went. So I bought a map of the area and would stay up late at night looking for the names of the cities and these little bitty villages, and found several of them. Found Pogorelets, which is a lot of people came from that area. Many of the Erie families came from there, and went to Suwałki City. Searched. None of the maps had the Old Believer Cemetery. And I found the prayer house back behind the bus station in a bunch of factories and garages, and it was in okay repair at that time. No one was there. The gates were locked. I went back in search of the cemetery, couldn't find it. And then I was like, where would they have buried Old Believers in the city? That didn't like Old Believers. And so I found the Jewish cemetery, and right next door was the Old Believer Cemetery, right across the wall, and walked into the back of through the Orthodox, the New Rite Orthodox Cemetery, and there's a chapel there, and there was a little trail through the weeds, and I walked back, and then all of a sudden there was a clearing, and all of these well-tended graves, and all of the names were exactly like up at Hannon Road in Bell Valley. It was really shocking. I knew immediately that I was in the right place as well. I then went back into town and went to the local library, and I said, give me all of your books on Old Believers, which is the same thing that I did here in Erie. And of course they said there are no books on Old Believers. And then they pulled out the newspaper file of articles on like people celebrating Easter on the wrong day. So I got all of those and read all of those and found the family names and things like that. And So I did the same in Suwalki, went to the public libraries, like, give me all of your books on Old Believers. And they brought exactly one book. And it was this book. And it was in Polish. And I speak Czech and I speak Russian, but I didn't speak Polish. And I sat and went page by page and wrote down, I knew enough about Polish orthography to know that a W is a V and things like that, J is a Y sound. And I went through, opened this book, found a map, and there were all of the names of all of the villages. And it was just amazing. And then I started seeing the names of the people, and they were all the same. And I knew that I needed to translate this. So I've given many talks at the church before, and I've translated small chunks of this, and I knew that everybody needed the whole book translated, because this is the only book that has all of the information about where the eastern U.S. Old Believers and their ancestors came from. If you Google Old Believers, you'll come up with a lot of things about Moscow that really doesn't have anything to do with the Old Believers in the eastern U.S. This book is their history from the schism in the 1660s and their flight westward into Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia as well. So finally, after 10 years and $11,000, is this book published at our publishing house in Bloomington, Indiana, where I'm a professor in the Slavic department. And our Slavica publishing house is the largest publishing house of Central and East European works in North America. It's very modest and very small, but it's still the largest. So they agreed to publish this book, and it just came out a couple of months ago as well. So it is now being carried in the church bookstore as well. It was published, the original was published in 1977. I didn't add any information to it other than to maybe explain the historical name changes and things like that, and maybe give some references to locations for people who don't know Polish history. And so this is the missing link, so to speak, of the history. So even this morning, people were talking about where do you come from and where are your people and things like that. I've been doing this research from this end and going through naturalization records and immigration records, finding villages for everybody's ancestors. I'm mostly done with that research now. So if you've ever walked through a cemetery and wondered who all these people are, like up at Hannon Road or in Bell Valley, I've now done that. I've identified everybody in the cemetery and who their parents are, or who their siblings were, who their spouse is, and who their children are, which means that I can then generate a family tree for anybody. One generation up, one generation down. And so now we're finally able to identify the people in the cemetery. Sometimes there were families that were dead ends, they didn't have children, and there's no one else to carry on their name, like the Schmoligans in Hannon Road. So this is the connection. What I'll do next is to write a connection piece between this book and the Eastern U.S. history and show where people came from and who they settled. But if you know your family's villages, I added, I had a colleague who did a subject index for this book. European books, Russian books, Polish books don't have a subject index. You can't go to the back and look things up. You can't go back and look up Pogorelets or something like that. And so my friend and colleague created a subject index for the book. So you can go and look up, if you know that your family was a Bashlaminov, like Tom Gorbatov's family, that is Viershnia in the village, and you can go into the subject and look it up and see when the village was founded and what information is on there as well. So this is a way of connecting the very, 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 very well-documented researched history up until 1977 of these communities, and then there's almost no mention of the Old Believers leaving for the United States, and probably about 2,000 of them did. And so those are just dead ends, histories in the book. And so what I'll be doing is connecting the mentions of these places and that history and those the regions that the Old Believers were in to the families that came to the United States. So I'm going to stop there. That's just a basic introduction to the book. I brought other books that are related to Old Believer iconography, written by my colleague who will be coming, Grigory Patashenko and Marie-Lise Pader. And that will give you a sense of how robust the history research is being done. We have a dictionary of the names from Poland and Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia as well. All of these books are in Russian. I'm slowly working my way through translating them as well to make them available, including a very nice cookbook that two of my colleagues, Adam and Olya Pogorzelski, so you can hear the Pogorzelets, their family is from that village, and they collected Old Believer recipes from their region. And so I have a copy of that, and then I translated it into English and American units of measure, and I can send that to anyone who would like. So I'll leave my business card, if anyone would like an electronic copy of that. I'll send it to you as well.
No, I'm not going to, I want you to go more and we're going to be questions with you. But I want to extrapolate a little on a couple of things he said that will help you to have more interest in this. So these people are going to be coming here and they're going to travel a great deal in the eastern part of the country to see Sophronov icons. I would like to just say a little bit more because you'll find this an interesting part of the story. Sophronov was an Old Believer. He came to America, again, as he indicated, 46, 47, something like that. But the interesting part of this was Sophronov painted icons in non-Old Believer churches. He painted through much, that's where they're going to be looking at, not a lot, mostly Old Believer churches. And because of that, a few of you, Katya, I think you would remember, maybe Larry, remember when we had the conferences? We used to have conferences of the 4 Old Believer parishes, Mariana, Detroit, Erie, and Millville. And when we had those conferences, Sophronov would be at those conferences. Our nastavnik, Father Vladimir Smolikov, did not like Sophronov very much because he felt Sophronov was kind of a traitor because he painted in Nikonian churches. So Sophronov was kind of looked at askew in his communities because he was viewed as, what are you doing painting for Nikonians? For the rest of the Orthodox Church, he was looked at as a brilliant iconographer, and as Jeff indicates, one of the most famous icon painters of the 20th century. One other thing I'd like to let you know is that he located in Millville, and around the same time he located in Millville, a man who had come with his mother from Odessa, fleeing World War II, for the Soviets in World War II, Dmitry Alexandrov, located in Millville, and Dmitry Alexandrov, who would become Bishop Daniel, was a student of Sophronov. So Bishop Daniel learned how to paint icons from Sophronov. And there are 2 icons of Bishop Daniel's in the church. On the bottom row of the iconostasis, on the right side, there's an icon of St. George, the great martyr, and on the left side, on the very left side of the women's side, there's one of St. Demetrius. Those are Bishop Daniel's icons. He became a famous iconographer himself, but he learned how to paint from Sophronov. So that trip they will be taking is looking at all the places that Sophronov painted icons in the United States. There's a very interesting connection with that. The second one I wanted to mention to you is there are also one of the 2. Which one is the one who's really an expert on Mikhailov? Both of them?
Both of them.
Okay, so the people who are coming here for the first time, they are experts on the icon painting of this man whose last name was Mikhailov. What was his first name?
Oh.
Okay, you're okay. Anyway, Mikhailov. What relevance does it have? If you look at the 3 large icons in the center of the iconostasis, the 3 large, Christ enthroned, flanked by the Mother of God and St. John the Baptist on either side, and Archangel Michael and Gabriel, those were brought over by Nastavnik Nikin in 1935. Mikhailov painted those paintings. So those icons are in church. However, in the 1977 fire, they were badly damaged. Father Theodore had to totally repaint the icon of Christ the Savior in the middle of it. It's still on the same board that Mihailov painted it. And on the two sides, Mother of God and Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, St. John the Baptist, if you look at them closely, you'll see they're kind of bubbled and so forth, and they're dented because they were damaged. Father Theodore restored those two icons. But those were the three outstanding icons in our church who were all painted by this painter Mihailov. And there are a number of old icons in cases on the side walls. Those icon painters, Jeff is pretty convinced, will be able to come here and tell us when and how they were painted, because that's a great mystery in our church. How old are those icons? We're not sure of those, but we'll be able to have that. And the last thing I wanted to say, just to extrapolate one more time, is on his point of, for many of you may not even know who Sava Legenzov was. Well, if you've ever gone to the Bell Valley Cemetery, and you go right in the middle of the cemetery, there's a large obelisk type of thing in the middle. That was founded by Sava Legenzov. He became known as Sam Lee. Many of the families, I'm looking at many of you, Joe, Katya, you certainly have into the Lee family and so forth. He founded that cemetery because Nikin, who was on Estavnik, and he had a falling out about one or different things. And so the Bell Valley Cemetery was founded by Sam Lee Sava Legenzov. And so Jeff's first contact, I'm going to go and find out where Sava Legenzov came from. That was a major guy in this whole community here. So I know one of the major questions will be, Jeff, and I don't know if it's all from the book. You, of course, really filled in the missing link to a great extent, where for any of us who are older, Joe or Katya, you would know this, when our grandparents would die, people would ask them, where were you born? And they were really hesitated to say Poland. We're born in Poland. But it was Poland, but it was really under the Russian situation. But where are we really from? We're clearly not Polish people, so where we come from. And I know you were the one who was able to indicate that when they located in the Polish area, they had come from this area of Russia. And you're the one who knows that. No, you're on now, I'm done.
So from the Pskov and Novgorod region, and then judging from the language interviews that I conducted with the oldest generation back in 1999, so many of those traits are from the Pskov area. And the name Paganov was always, I could never figure out where the name Paganov came from, and it was in none of the dictionaries, the surname dictionaries. And then I found the Pskov dialect dictionary, and it has the word Piganli, which is the Pskovian form of Piegi, which is piebald, which is the pattern of the coat of a horse. And so many of the old believers raised and traded horses that many of them have horse-related names. I can remember the first time I saw Zhotanosif, yellow nose, and I'm thinking, does this person have jaundice when they're a child? And these are yellow-nosed horses that they have as well. So and that name, that word Piganli, it was only in that one dictionary, that Pskov dictionary. And then I started digging in the maps, in the old historical maps, and found a village called Piganov Most, the Paganov's Bridge. And so that was more indication that I was on the right track. So I've been translating books from Russian on the history of the Pskov old believers and who didn't come. But if you look at that map, you can see that they fled as far away as they could. If they were living in Pskov, they just crossed the border, kept going westward. So I will actually be teaching a course next spring at Indiana University in Bloomington on old believers. So it's called the Priestless Old Believers in Their Westward Diaspora. So moving westward away from Moscow and the Russian Empire as well. So I'm putting together a lot of materials on specifically that westward diaspora and how they wound up in the United States to try to fill in some more of these gaps in the history as well. So.
Jeff, one of the questions, of course, and I asked you the other day is, they came from Pskov to Poland in the late 1700s, and then in the late 1800s, most of them left. Why did they come there in the beginning? Why did they leave?
So they were moving into Polish lands So they're fleeing the Russian Empire. In my dissertation that I wrote in 2002 on language maintenance and language loss here in the Erie community, I also wrote the histories of the Erie community and gathered together all of the publications about that to try to give people a general history at that time, which we didn't have at all. The Ivanitz book will then show the years that the villages were founded. So the point at which they're fleeing the Russian Empire, the phrase was, Peter the Great's arm is long, but it can't reach us here. And they kept moving west, and then the Russian Empire kept expanding west and west and west. And if the border changed all the way and encompassed them, they would flee over the border again and again. Finally winding up, Nikan Pansarev, they were part of a group in the 1820s and 30s that fled and asked for permission to go to East Prussia. To really go completely into basically Western Europe to find refuge as well and set up a monastery and communities and villages there as well. So in the middle of the 1700s, people are continuing to flee into Poland. They're getting permission from the Polish landlords to come in, cut down all the trees, build a permanent structure. They had to cut down the trees, but they couldn't use the trees. So the landlords would then haul off the trees as to sell. But then the old believers were able to farm the land that they had cleared as well. And they were studied and they didn't pose any threat. They weren't radicals. They just wanted to practice their religion. So they settled in the middle of the 1700s. There was then conflict within the communities, as happens so often, and some of the groups then also said, let's go to another place. And they explored all different places in Europe to go. And it was only a small portion that came to the United States to work. At first it was just to come and make money and come back to the village and buy land, buy a house. And then people found that, especially the Mariana Church was built in 1909, before World War I. So that was already a sign that there were people who wanted to stay relatively long term to build a church, to do that, and to found their cemetery as well. And then in 1914, World War I breaks out, and the Germans rule through Poland, including through all the areas where there were Old Believer villages. Old Believers fled into the depths of Russia, and then came back after World War I, and then World War II, the same thing happened. The Germans, and this time the Nazis, came through Poland. The Old Believers either fled into Russia or they were forcibly resettled into Lithuania. So if you have letters from Lithuania in old church boxes and stuff, and this was the case with the Wassels, it's like, why are in the Federoffs, or why are these letters coming from Lithuania? These were all the Old Believers who were resettled into Lithuania and stayed. And most of them left Poland and most of them stayed. And so to go looking for relatives, very often that happens in Lithuania, not in Poland. But if anyone is interested in their genealogy, I can help connect you with families. Again, I'll leave my cards in the back. I know basically everybody's families. If I don't know them, it's probably on my list of things to do as well. And I can tell you where the villages are. If you want to connect with cousins back in the old country, I know where they are in Poland. I know where they are in Lithuania. I know where everybody's buried as well. So I have documented all the Old Believer cemeteries in the eastern United States, all of the cemeteries in Poland, and just last year I finished, after 20 years, finished all of the cemeteries, the Old Believer cemeteries in Lithuania as well. So I now have searchable files, and I can tell you all of the places where all of the Persianos are buried in any of these countries as well. And then I have ways of being able to connect to the congregations if you're looking for cousins or wonder who's still alive or where they are now as well.
Jeff, but if they were there for about 100 years, from the late 1700s to the late 1800s, so we know that there was almost no immigration in the eastern part of Old Believers after World War I began. So it's almost all from about 1875, 1880 till, let's say, 1910. Was there a crisis? What led to them at that point kind of going, okay, we're going to make this leap into a American society?
Part of that was, so the question is, why did the Old Believers come to the United States from the 1880s until 1914 was that cutoff? And there were a number of things going on. Number one, it was a quick way of making money and making actual physical money and not just barter money. It was a way of I thought everybody was farming in Suwałki. There were some city people as well, and maybe in your families you'll hear stories about like, oh yeah, well they were this branch of the family, they were city folk, and they lived in Suwałki City, and not in the villages. They spoke a different style of Russian because they were city folk, being in Suwałki City. I was expecting that they would come like my Mennonite Holdeman ancestors left farming in Europe, came to Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana and became farmers. I expected everybody would become farmers. And there are, I think I know maybe 5 families that set up farms in the United States, because it's so expensive. You had to have money to be able to buy equipment and buy land and buy seed and take care of things, set things up. The people coming over didn't have that capital to do that, but they could immediately get work in mines that would immediately pay cash money that they could convert, take back, and then buy land, bring back, either go back and stay. And I have records of that. Of the people who went back to the old country and stayed. And we don't track in the United States, we don't track who leaves the country. We only track who comes in like Ellis Island. And so I have all the Ellis Island records of everybody coming, and it's the same person coming 2 and 3 and 4 times, but there are no records of them leaving. So I'll be looking for that in Hamburg to try to see if I can find where people were coming back to Europe. But some people went back, gave money to their families, and then brought wives over. So it was men who were coming over first. And then I tracked when whole families are coming over. And that's the real shift to say, like, that's a commitment. That's not just making money. That's bringing your entire family over with little kids over. That looks like people are going to stay. And to say we can make money here, we can have a house eventually, we can build a church, and have a life here. And that was before the Russian Orthodox Church and the Tsar had lifted the anathemas on the Old Believers, so they were still persecuted as well. And they could come to the state of Indiana and the place to go if you wanted to practice or enjoy religious freedom as well. There were so many things. The other nice thing is, I just drove down to Mariana yesterday. I can remember the first time that I went to Poland and taking the bus out to the villages. It looks exactly like this area. It is spectacular. There are lakes and forests and streams with fish in them, and fields and rolling hills and the kind of glacial moraines and everything. It looks and feels just like the old country. And Lithuania, I've now covered the entirety of Lithuania. It's the same. It's a wonderful feeling. I know that when they came here, they felt at home. Those who went to Michigan to do the lumber industry, that was what they were doing in Poland as well. I just don't think that paid as well or as quickly as working in the mines, and then people came and worked in the mines as well. So there was the quick money aspect, there was the religious freedom aspect, there was the fact that they could come here religiously and not be judged by their religion in coming was a freedom. I don't know whether they were saying, oh, we really want to come to America so that we can practice the old belief. That might not have been the case for the majority of the people, but it was for some. And after the mine disaster in Mariana in 1908, where many Old Believer men were killed, the mining company donated the bricks to build the church in Mariana, that yellow brick church on Broad Street. So they could have just kept that money. Instead, they invested it in the building of that church as well. They could have, I guess, built homes for themselves. But they built a church and they built a cemetery as well. When you build a cemetery, you're saying we're going to stay here. The commitment to build Hannon Road, Cemetery, Hannon Road Cemetery, that was in part because of the great influenza. There were so many people dying. And they before had been burying people at Erie Cemetery and said, we need a place of our own, which is an Old Believer cemetery. And that's the origin, the 1918 opening first burials in Hannon Road as well. That's a big commitment to say we're going to bury our ancestors here in this land and not in the old country.
I just want to say one thing about it, just another word. That's another one of those things that Jeff gave to us, because everyone knows that one of the things that from Erie, Pennsylvania, from the old Rite Church is skanser, right? Skanser. You go up to ask Nadezhda, who came from Russia, if she knows what skanser, and she's going to tell you no, she never heard skanser before. So that's another one of these words right from that Skov area. That's kind of the dialect we had, and that's interesting because skanse are one of our big. Go up to most Russians and say, "Well, we have skanse." They won't even know what you're talking about.
And that recipe is also in the Old Believer cookbook, as well as kislitsa or kishitsa, sorrel soup, which I made a 2-gallon pot of last week as well from the recipe in that book. It is spectacular. Yes, Father.
From your travels in going to villages and visiting cemeteries and churches, I'm curious to know, maybe someone in the room knows, why was our church, when it was first built, the Church of the Nativity of Christ? Could it be chance in Pogadelets, that was the name of the church and they just carried it over? Do you happen to know how it was called the Church of the Nativity of Christ?
Wonderful. So the question is, why was the church built in Erie the Church of the Nativity of Christ? I have been collecting all of the names of all of the prayer houses and churches to try to see the patterns. So I'm close to being done with the statistics of that. Part, of course, you'll have the feast day. There will be the feast day for the prayer house, for the church. And so sometimes it was completion of that, but building a prayer house was might take a year or more, but they would usually pick a tradition. There is something that is even deeper, I think. There are a lot of St. Nicholases, and a lot of Holy Trinities, and a lot of Church of the Nativities, and as opposed to the Romanians, like my family, that's all St. George. All of those are St. George churches. So I will be able to answer that question sometime soon. It is those are like the top 3 or 4. But it's a very small set. It's an interestingly small set as well. So send me an email and I will send you what I know of the names of some of the churches, and maybe we can put that together as well.
Wait, Jeff, I just want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
If any of you are reading this book, the one he's talking about, it's a marvelous book, but the origins in many ways of the Old Believer groups can become really convoluted and can become confusing until you almost come to the point when he comes to the area around Suwałki where people came from. I'm wondering, Jeff, do you have any, what is a lot simpler almost, is the stuff that you have in your dissertation. Do you have any problem if we copied it and sold it through our bookstore?
That is, We can talk
Okay,
about
we can talk about that.
I usually would send copies.
Even if it's not
people.
selling it, if we had a couple, just people even could borrow out of our library.
Absolutely.
This really gets almost a much simpler way of explaining specifically exactly where, if you are a family who actually grew up in this church, like where your family came from. This is really wonderful. I found this a lot more revelatory than I just did. But you have to really read through this.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
it's not a good book. It is.
So my dissertation is highly simplified for the background. Ivanians, if you really want to know all of these steps that affected only the old believers who came westward, the Ivanians book is wonderful. The first chapter is dense history. You'll agree, it is hard to get through. I recommend that people, if you start reading it and you don't engage with it, skip to the next chapter, and then that'll get into the regions as well. If you want to start with the Suwalki Seni region and read that will be, you'll hear the names and the villages and things to help you engage. And then the last chapters, they're fascinating because it's like wooden architecture and food preparation and clothing. If you have ever thought about an old believer monastery, an old believer convent, I just never, until recently, had even thought about that until I read that book. And then it has a whole chapter on the founding of the monastery in Vojnovo. And again, that's where Father Nikan Pansarev came from as well. And then where the men would go back and get their wives, the Lebedevs, are from that area as well.
Yeah, the end of this is really cool because he talks about a lot, like monyaks. Everybody here heard about a monyak. Most people wouldn't know what a monyak was. So he talked about the food and the kind of dress that everybody wore. It's really worthwhile.
All the different types of crosses, from processional crosses to the kind of cross that you might have in your kibot or your bajnica, or that you would wear on your body, and things like that. So it goes through very systematically all the types as well. So it's not just history, but it's also culture.
Gorbachev, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Tim Gorbachev. My dad was Tom. My grandparents are part of the church. I was not raised in the Old Believer church, but I was certainly raised in the Old Believer culture. So when my dad passed away some years ago, it got me really into wanting to learn more about it, because just like you said, Father, I would ask my grandfather, about, well, where in Russia where are you from? We're in Russia, and they had really no clue. So I wanted to start learning about all of this and the history of everything. So I'm going to give a shameless plug to the professor here, because that dissertation I was able to obtain a copy. That was mind-blowing in itself. Then I started researching online, and that book was referenced everywhere in the world. I mean, Vilnius University in Lithuania and all the other places are also have studies of old believers. This is like the Bible of it. So when I saw that you were going to translate that, and that you did, that was pretty amazing. So these are great resources if you want to learn about it. Question for you is, I know that Suwalki was a militarily strategic region, still is, the Suwalki Gap and between Belarus and Kaliningrad and all that. And that was a thoroughfare that the Germans went through, and people scattered. They were not welcome there when the Germans came through, and that was twice in their history. So the question for you is this: if we went back there, would our lineage still be there? Are they in Lithuania, Latvia, or did they come back to that community?
So the question is, in the Suwalki region, did the old believers stay? Is there anybody to visit? Basically, is the question. Yes, there still are. They number in the hundreds, maybe up to 1,000 or so, of people who are practicing and kind of practicing. They went through the same shift that happened in the United States just a couple of generations later. They shifted to Polish very largely. They started intermarrying with the Catholics in the area. And so it was just a delayed thing. But there still are the prayer houses, the Vodziuki prayer house, which is northwest of Suwalki City, and there's a picture of that. We are raising money right now to restore the foundation, so they will need probably $2,500 to shore up the foundation of the prayer house there as well. And Suwalki City's prayer house is in relatively good condition. It just had a recent renovation. Gabowy Grande has a relatively it has an active prayer house with a nastavnik. The Wojnowo Monastery is now a tourist attraction. The prayer house, the nastavnik passed away a couple of years ago, but the community is still there. There are still people there. There are still people to visit. There are still active cemeteries, and I can tell you where the cemeteries are. I can tell you where the villages are as well. I have maps with flags on all of the places. And then the ones who went to Lithuania, now that I've finished documenting the cemeteries, I know where all of them wound up. So that's also nice. The easy way of finding them is to go to Klaipėda on the Baltic Sea. And there's another book that Grigori wrote on the history of the Kaunas congregation. They just built a huge, beautiful red brick prayer house. It is massive and it is beautiful. And that population, that congregation is maybe the second largest in Lithuania now. It might have surpassed Kaunas as well. They are doing very well, and when you go into the cemeteries there, it's all the names that are at the cemeteries here as well. They're all the Suwalki old believers who they stopped in, or they resettled in pockets and places. They weren't necessarily always welcomed either by the locals or necessarily sometimes by the old believers, but Klaipėda was on the sea, shipbuilding, lots of jobs, land, and they resettled there, and it's all of the families are there. If you have one place to visit in Lithuania to find your relatives from here, it's Klaipėda. It's not even Vilnius, it's Klaipėda.
Thank you. But one other thing, I spent an amazing afternoon on Saturday, 3-4 hours with Mr. Morawski. And he went through the history. He had a trove of documents and history himself that he collected. Even why this plot of land was where the Russians settled, and why was this accessible, and why did because they were even passing through to go to Detroit, but they found this. There was jobs waiting because the Irish were moving out to the GE plant. So I presume maybe you have access to that. If not, there was just so much there that he went through.
Great.
You know what I want to do? I want to pray so those of you who want to leave can. And those of you who have more questions for Jeff, you can stay, but I said we'd be done by 11:15. So if you want to leave, you can do so, and if you have questions at the end, we can go on with this.